Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. Today, my guest is Bev Goldman, and I'm very privileged to have her on my program. I have known of Bev for a long, long time, but we've never actually met face to face. We met on Zoom, but that was all. Our topic today is going to be Tikkun Olam, which is the Jewish concept to repair the world, and also Sawubona, which means I see you, and it's a Zulu word, which is the recognition of the inherent value in each person. I want to just tell you a bit about Bev. She's currently the national president of the Union of Jewish Women in South Africa, a remarkable organization which celebrated its 90th anniversary in 2021. So that means it's 94 years old now.
It is, yes.
And she's been interviewed a number of times by various people on radio. She took on the position of the national president after spending time as an Israel consultant for the South African Israel Chamber of Commerce. And one of the things she was doing was introducing Israeli technology into South Africa. She holds honors degrees in African politics and English literature from Wits University, as well as the University of Johannesburg, which was the Rand University, RAW. She has a master's degree in feminist literature from RAW. She also holds a UNISA postgrad higher education diploma in English and science. She's an accredited member of the Public Relations Institute of South Africa. She's been involved with education for more than 30 years. I can go on and on and on telling you about her, but she's also lectured in both African politics and English at Wits University and RA. It's wonderful to have you here today, Bev. And today we are discussing Tikkun Olam, to reach out to others. And I just wanted to first of all know from you, the Union of Jewish Women, it reaches out across all spectres of South Africa and our population. Tell me a bit about it, please.
Hi, Sue. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about the Union, which of course is incredibly close to my heart. The Union, as you said, was established in 1931. It was started by Tony Safra, who came out from Germany and who was very concerned about ensuring that all the organizations, the Jewish organizations, combined in order to do good work, because at the time she came out, the organizations were all separate and they did sort of separate things. So it took an immigrant to bring local organizations together. The Union is a remarkable organization, as I've said. In the beginning and over the years soon after following it, there were many, many branches. At one stage, there was something like 50 branches of the Union all over the country, in the little towns, etc. Unfortunately, unfortunately, over the years, the Jewish community has shrunk considerably. All these little sort of shtetl towns, etc., are no longer have anyone Jewish in them, sadly, because that is where so much of the Union's work was done. It was really done beautifully in those areas. Now we have 6 branches. We have one in Johannesburg, in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, Pretoria, Cape Town, Durban, East London, and Port Elizabeth.
We're going to get back to that.
Okay, fine.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hi, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program, and my guest today is Bev Goldman, and we were talking about the South African
Union of
Jewish Women. I looked. Yeah. We both said that at times we forget things. So I looked at Bev in absolute confusion. Bev,
yes.
When you were saying it was in all the little towns, I remember in Germiston, when we first got married and we lived there.
I was born in Germiston.
Oh, were you?
And grew up there as a child. Yeah.
Well, it was a very strong union of Jewish women there.
Very strong Jewish community as well, very strong.
And tell me a bit about, once you say you were actually brought up there, how did your parents instill in you the care for other people?
Absolutely. My mother was for well over 40 years the honorary treasurer of Wheatsoe in Germiston. My father was a very influential figure in the Germiston Shul. My parents were, charity was the basis of our growing up. But there was one thing that my mother used to get a little bit annoyed about. And in those days, I don't know if it still happens, but in those days, very frequently, Rabbonim would come from Israel, and they would come to collect money for either their children's bar mitzvahs or weddings or something like that. And somehow they would find where the Jewish families were. And my father appeared to be the best one for them, because they would be constantly knocking at the front door asking for money, and my father just used to give it, and my mother would get eventually a little bit annoyed to say, charity begins at home, and it begins in Germiston for the Germiston community and not so much for the Israeli. But he couldn't say no. He didn't know how to say no. My mother also, to a large extent. I mean, she deprived herself of so much so that she could help. I remember also that she was one of the first people to separate disposable rubbish, and she was a very heavy smoker, and she used to take her cigarette boxes and open them up and iron the silver paper and send it all up to a little Afrikaans nursery school at the top of our road where we lived, and the children used to use that. So it was ingrained in me, my mother doing for others very much before you do for yourself.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, 1,000 years ago, Maimonides established levels of charity.
Yes.
And he noted that it is the most important act a person can do.
Right.
Do you feel that today's generation are as involved with organizations like the Union of Jewish Women as they were when I was in Germiston? A lot of us were young. We were young marrieds. And we were very involved.
Unfortunately not, Sue. That's one problem that not only the union is facing, but Wheatsoe and the Jewish Women's Benevolent as well. The young women today have got so much, they do so much. They're involved in so many things, and they're very involved with their children. And it's difficult to get young women to, for example, to become members of organizations. What does work is if you have a project, for example, and you want help from the community, you want donations, etc., they're very good at doing that. They're incredibly generous. But they're kind of more generous with their money and their goods than they are with their own time. And I suppose it's to be understood or to be accepted. One can't criticize them for doing anything like that. But on that point, I would just like to read a short paragraph that comes from the book that the Women of Action, the History of the Union of Jewish Women, that was written by Karen Kalman. She's wonderful. She's the chairman of the Cape Town branch of the Union of Jewish Women, and she's a remarkable young woman. And she did the whole history of the Union of Jewish Women up until about the 1950s. And this is the one thing that she wrote about in the past. An examination of Union of Jewish Women membership shows that the organization attracted women from across the entire spectrum of political opinion, religious affiliation, and ethnic background. Zionist and non-Zionist, Eastern European as well as Anglo, German, Orthodox and Reform Jews, Sephardi and Ashkenazi, professional and non-professional were all reflected in the union's membership. This inclusiveness points to the wide appeal of the mission and the open vision of the UJW and how it united Jewish women in achieving the organization's goals. But that, of course, was when there was a much larger Jewish community in South Africa. I think the same sentiments still hold with those people who work for and volunteer with the union. But as I said, the community has shrunk so much that we don't have that. But the union really does, it does embrace everybody who is in need, who comes to the union, who can be helped, irrespective of color, creed, race, age, whatever.
Is that part of the philosophy of
Yes,
the union?
Most definitely. Broad humanity. We have sort of three philosophies: Judaism, which is very important to us; feminism, which is the crux of the union, because we are an organization that fights fiercely for women's rights in all areas; and then broad humanity, which means, looking after the people of South Africa, those people who are in need, those people who want help, those people who need food, they need education, they need empowerment skills. All of those sorts of things fall under the ambit of the union in different ways according to each autonomous individual branch of the union. But I have the utmost admiration for the chairman of our branches, who are women with such passion and such dedication and commitment. And what they've achieved is sometimes extraordinary, given the fact that everybody is a volunteer, except possibly the secretaries in the organizations. So everybody works, on a completely volunteer basis and just gives of their time, their passion, their energy. And what is the reward? The reward is to see the faces of the people who have been given, or who are the beneficiaries of the various things that the union does. So it is quite a remarkable organization, and one of the few Jewish organizations that works in the outreach community as well as in the Jewish community. And, our record speaks for ourselves. It's quite funny, because I know that in certain sort of rural areas where the union might be involved, the women will go in and the people there will say, "Oh, are you the Jewish? Oh, we're very happy to have the Jewish here." So,
isn't that lovely?
I think the union also does a lot in keeping the image of the Jewish community alive and very positive across the country.
So that Jewish spark will live on.
Absolutely.
Now, you were talking about the different cities where it is, and the women who are actually running it there. I think today also so many of the young people are working.
Yeah.
And in the afternoon, I cannot believe the number of extramural activities that children do today.
I know, it worries me that the children don't have a chance just to lie on the grass and count the birds in the sky, because they're on a roll all the time. I mean, it's how it is today.
And so are the parents on a roll.
Well, they're doing for their children all the time.
But I must admit, you do get. And I'm just thinking of our synagogue in particular. We're a member of Linksfield, and how often there's so many outreach projects there.
Yes.
Thank you, Craig.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program, and my guest today is Bev Goldman, and we're talking about reaching out to others, Sawubona, Tikkun, and Ubuntu, all of them in one. It's how we heal the world, and when we reach out and touch other people, we touch their hearts as we touch our own too. If you would like to WhatsApp us, and if you want to ask any questions, Bev any questions, please do so on WhatsApp 061 895 1019. We're now going to hear an audio clip, very short one. It's by Rabbi Green on Tikkun. Rabbi Green is from Hebrew College.
The Jewish people has been exiled from its land since the destruction of the temple by the Romans. Before that, the temple had been destroyed by the Babylonians. And that consciousness of exile became a very deep part of the Jewish mentality. We are in exile, but one day we'll be restored. That sense of exile, you can say, goes back even farther than the first destruction of the temple. It goes back to the story of the expulsion from the Garden of Eden itself. Once we left Eden, all humanity, you may say, is in exile. We live in an exilic world. And we long to be restored to the original home, to the original Eden in which human beings were created. That sense of exile and redemption long exile, longing for redemption, has very much been a part of the Jewish religious mentality for thousands of years. Tikkun Olam means working to bring about the end of that exile. It means repairing the world, bringing the sparks of light back, discovering the goodness of God wherever it's scattered. How do we do that? We do that by living with other people. We do that by doing acts of goodness, acts of human kindness. Every time you do good, you are raising up some of that light, making the world a better place, bringing the presence of God into greater clarity in your life and in the lives of those around you, and bringing Messiah's arrival one step closer. We have to do everything we can to make that arrival more possible by making the world better, by bringing about some bit of redemption in our own lives. Jews have understood that very well, partly because of the suffering and oppression that's been so much a part of our history. And therefore, many Jews, even if they don't think of themselves as religious, don't know very much about the tradition, bear within them that sense of making the world a better place is something we have to do. We're very proud of the fact that many Jews, even if they see themselves as secular, have somehow deeply within them a sense that I have to work to make the world better. I have to work for more human decency, for more human rights, for more recognition of every human being as the image of God. That sense that we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, that sense that we know the soul of the stranger because we were oppressed, that sense that we have long been in exile and we have to help others redeem their worlds as we redeem ours, is a very deep part of the Jewish soul and the Jewish experience through our history.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. My guest today is Bev Goldman, and we are talking about the Union of Jewish Women. And, I was just thinking, Bev, as I was listening to that, the Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson of blessed memory, he says, Tikkun Olam, the repair of the world. If you see what needs to be repaired and how to repair it, then you have found a piece of the world that God has left for you to complete. But if you only see what is wrong and what is ugly in the world, then it is you yourself that needs repair.
That is extremely profound, Sue, extremely, and very true. And I love that clip also, all the things that were said. Those are the mandates of the Union of Jewish Women. I have to keep saying that. That is what we try and do, repairing the parts of the world that we can do that are within our ambit. Making things better, recognizing the pain, understanding the sorrows, and just giving love over and above all, and not doing it because it's a duty, but because it's a love and a need. So
and do you feel when you do reach out like that, do you reach in and heal parts of our own spark?
I think we do, because I think if you don't do anything for other people, and it's not a criticism, not everybody can do it, and not everybody is easy doing that. But if you do things like that, you do feel that you've achieved something amazing, that you've helped a person, even if it's a transitory thing, even if it's a very short moment of doing it. You've brought a smile or a sense of happiness to someone, and that's a purpose that one has in life, is by helping other people to feel better, because you are able to share that with them.
And let's face it, that in South Africa, there's always that opportunity.
Goodness me, it's just overwhelming, Sue. And I don't know how many people know. I don't know how much people know about it, but it is overwhelming. Wherever you go in South Africa, the need is so great. And we can only do what we can do. But that's why we feel very happy with what we do, because we know that we brought a lot of good to those people. And let me quickly add that it's not only the outreach community in which we work, the very broad community. We also do a lot of work within the Jewish community where we need to. So our reach is pretty good and pretty far.
So you're actually involved with many other organizations as well that you help with.
We do. We
just
work
mention
where we
a few?
can. Well, we try to do a lot of work together with WITSO where we can.
What is WITSO?
WITSO is a Women's International Zionist Organization, which has been also around for many, many years. And, WITSO works specifically for Israel. We don't work specifically for Israel, but in times of need, for example, now, since the 7th of October, God help us all, our union branches have done a lot of work for the soldiers. We've been knitting beanies. We've sent thermal vests. We've done wonderful things for it. So we work with them. We are an affiliate of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. And when we are asked to help, for example, we gave a very large donation to the JNF, the Jewish National Fund. Some years back, there was a huge fire, and we contributed. So where we can, we will help and work with other organizations. My ideal, my dream, and I have said this unreservedly for a long time, is because of the small number of Jews in the country, the small number of community in the country, I would so love there to be a much closer link among all the organizations, the Jewish organizations, to work together more. But because they all have different aims and they have different goals in mind, it's quite difficult to do. But it would be so nice if we had a huge community organization, for want of a better word, doing it. I mean, the Chevra Kadisha does wonderful work, but its work is what it does. The union's work is what it does, etc. So it's not always easy to do that, but I can dream, can't I?
Absolutely. And also, I think you look and see what is the need within our community,
yes.
And then you step forward, don't
Yes,
you?
we do when the need is there, if we're able to.
Now, Bev, I see that you were head of media, public relations and education at the South African Zionist Fed, dealing with Middle East media and political issues, and that you were the founder and former director of Media Team Israel.
Yeah, I wasn't the founder. I was one of the directors. Media Team Israel, to the best of my knowledge, I think was started by Yehuda Kay, who was at one stage the director of the Jewish Board of Deputies.
Okay.
But I worked very closely at the Zionist Federation. I did a lot. In fact, I had a radio program on Chai FM for quite a long time where I interviewed Israeli, people who were involved in Israeli technology, just to let the listeners know exactly what was available and how fantastic it was. But the very difficult part of what I did was, of course, dealing with the media, which has always been incredibly hostile to Israel. It's
and very biased.
Very, very biased. Radio, newspapers, etc. When I was doing it, there wasn't social media. So we had to deal directly with the newspapers and with the editors of the newspapers, and it was very difficult to get them to see both sides of the story. Anything that came from Israel was immediately anathema to them. I mean, that's something that's been going on for years, and I've always maintained that it wasn't anti-Israel, it was anti-Semitism. Much as they fought against it and said, no, we really like the Jews, we only don't like Israel. But the Jews and Israel are inextricably linked, and you can't separate the one from the other. And I think there's a lot of that going around today as well. People
more.
hate Israel, but it's actually more anti-Semitism now than ever, and it's very worrying. We're such a blip in the nations of the world. We're so small, and yet somehow or other we are the most reviled country. More so than North Korea, more so than Syria, more so than any of those countries.
More so than Iran.
Yes, because of who we are. We're Jews. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think perhaps, well, first of all, I do believe there's a lot of jealousy involved.
Yes, without a doubt.
But also we do reach out to others, and not everybody does. Everyone's got the opportunity to do so. I mean, you also edited the monthly South African Zionist Fed, the Fed Speak newspaper.
Yes, yeah.
And I see you remain a contributor to that still. On the Israel-Palestine conflict and on Israel in general in the magazine Jewish Life. It says to the Impact for Christ Ministries magazine. What is that?
It's an incredible magazine. It's an organization that is very, very passionate about Israel. And they do a lot of work for Israel. In fact, there are quite a few Christian organizations in South Africa that do wonderful work within Israel. And, the Christians, the majority of Christians in South Africa hold Israel in the highest respect. They hold the Jews in the highest respect because they believe in the Bible. And they believe that Hashem granted Israel to the Jews and it belongs to them. So they put across their policies, their ideals, etc., everything they do in order to make sure that their audiences are aware of the value of Israel, not only to the Jews, but to the Christian community from a biblical perspective.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned to me, and I don't know anything about them, but just hang on a moment.
Is that on, Craig? Thanks.
Okay, thanks,
okay.
Craig.
Thank you very much,
now.
Craig. Okay, I was at this meeting.
Just go back to where we were talking about the Shemba.
Okay, well, I mentioned that to you because last week I was at a meeting that was hosted by the South African Friends of Israel, Bafana Modise, who happens to be the spokesperson for SAFI, and he had invited a whole lot of Christian leaders to have what he called a Jerusalem dialogue. And I was very privileged to be asked, and I arrived there, and it was amazing because the leader of the Shemba tribe was there with a whole lot of his followers. And I know a little bit about them. I know that they're very pro-Israel. There are something like 8 million Shembas.
Where did they originate?
In KwaZulu-Natal.
Ah.
That is their place of origin, and there are 8 million followers them. And they traveled to Israel recently to demonstrate solidarity and deepen their ties with the Jewish state. Now, the Shemba have very interesting traditions. So, for example, they came in, I can't remember how many, there were maybe 9 or 10 men who came with the leader, and they walked in and they all sat down on the floor. And I understood from somebody, this is just what I was told, that because he is held in such high esteem, they will never be higher than he is. So when he sits on a chair, they all sit on the floor. They wear wonderful African clothing. They have got their traditional clothing, which, for example, all the men are bearded, for the Shemba are prohibited from shaving. They're forbidden to smoke and drink, and interestingly enough, they're forbidden to keep domestic cats and dogs in their homes because they believe cats and dogs have their own separate hell, based on a Shembi contention that these animals can be used to bewitch other people.
Good heavens.
Which is quite a strange thing, but, every culture has its own traditions.
And certainly if we look into some of our traditions, they're also pretty strange.
Aren't they very odd, yeah. And then this I thought was very interesting. I'll just read you this very briefly. The symbols of men among the Shemba followers include carrying Zulu warrior shields and being draped in leopard skin. Some wear loincloths of monkey tails, a leopard skin belt, elaborate headgear with ostrich feathers, and a cap of leopard skin slung along their back, shoulders, and chests. The leopard skins are a symbol of royalty, indicating power, prestige, pride, and beauty. And then also the swords that they used to use as Zulus are now used as symbols of power because they don't do that anymore. So I thought it was fantastic. And I also understand that when they were in Israel, there's Israelis who were fortunate enough to see them, were overawed by their dignity. I think over and above everything, they have such dignity. And that dignity combined with their support of Israel is something that just made me feel so special. Here were these South African Shembas coming to Israel, showing their support and with such dignity, and so different, for example, from the hostility that our government tends to show towards Israel. And the difference between the two was quite overt.
And why were you invited?
I think I know Bafana very well. I have worked with him for a long time in various areas. And he invited me. The union does sometimes collaborate with him on certain areas. He has been a guest speaker at the Johannesburg branch of the union's AGM, and I just know him personally, and he's an absolutely delightful, charming young man, and he's been to Israel, I don't know, maybe 20 times.
Wow.
Much more than I have.
I was going to say, I haven't been there for that long.
No, neither
Thank you,
have I.
Craig.
High FM 101.9 megahertz of life. This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. If you would like to join in our conversation, I'm with Bev Goldman. You can on 061 895 1019. That is a WhatsApp. And we were talking about the Shemba and how they've been, how unbelievably supportive they are of Israel. And the head of the Shemba tribe has been, would you call them a tribe or a clan, I suppose, either?
Yeah.
And has
Yes.
been to Israel for 20 times. I mean,
Yes.
that is absolutely
That's
amazing.
amazing.
What else did you want to tell me
Well,
about
apropos
them?
them, Sue, I'd like to just mention that Heritage Day, which I think is the 24th of September, there's a heritage breakfast which is being hosted by the Union of Jewish Women and Kolenu, and you are going to be the moderator. I have to give you a little plug here. And it is a breakfast at which we have two amazing speakers, Mari Soekers, who's a member of the ACDP, and Sheikh Fatso Motang, who has a master's in global political economy. And they are incredibly supportive of Israel. Another two black women who just think Israel is fantastic. And they're going to be talking, it's going to be through a different lens. And it's on the 24th of September, and it would be really nice if any of the listeners would be interested in coming, men and women. It's a morning of hope and inspiration. Places are limited, so if people could book now, you can book your tickets through Quicket. I had to learn how to book my ticket through Quicket. I wasn't quite
And
sure.
what must they
and
look
it's
up?
called quicket.co.za events, and it's Heritage Day Breakfast Through a New Lens. That's what it's called. And I think it's going to be extremely valuable. I've spoken to both women, and I was blown away by their passion for Israel and by their passion as women for other women. It's just amazing. So if anyone's interested, either Quicket or they can contact you, Sue. I'm sure they can, for further information on this on Heritage Day,
Good.
the 24th of September.
Or otherwise, Kolenu.
Yes, or Kolenu, or the Union.
K-O-L-E-I-N-U, or the Union of
Jewish Women.
Yeah.
Yes, all of us. Yeah.
Bev, we started saying that we were talking about to repair the world, Tikkun, Olam, and Sawubona. And I found this, which I found quite interesting. It says, the Zulu greeting has been on our tongues and in our hearts for much of the past 10 years. It literally means, I see you. And more than words of politeness, Sawubona carries the importance of recognizing the worth and the dignity of each person. It says, I see the whole of you, your experiences, your passions, your pain, your strengths and weaknesses, and your future. You are valuable to me.
It's so respectful, isn't it, Sue?
Isn't it beautiful?
It's so gracious and respectful the way it is. It really is. It's something that we could all learn from, you know.
If we only all just live by that maxim, how wonderful.
Wouldn't it be
that we see each other? I mean, how often do we go down our streets or go down, walking through a mall or anything, and we keep our eyes down. We don't always greet people. Although your children say you greet everybody. My children say the same to me.
Yes, they do sometimes. They say it's enough already. But you know what I find amazing is occasionally, and I do greet everybody, but sometimes I'll say hello to somebody, to a man, and he'll put his hands together and he'll say, thank you very much. You know, acknowledging that a white woman has said hello to a black man. after all the years, after 30 years of democracy, I still find that very painful. I found it extremely painful that, it's still, there's so much, awe for the white people, and there really shouldn't be. Why should there be awe for us? We're all exactly the same.
I do think that our younger generation of our Rainbow Nation are very different.
Yes,
they are being brought up. I see it with my grandchildren, who have a mixed variety of friends, and
which is wonderful.
Wonderful, and it warms my heart, I must admit. Yeah. There's an African proverb that says, "It is not what you are called, but what you answer to that matters."
And then it also says, it takes a village to raise a child, and that too is a wonderful thing. I think it really does. There's
Absolutely.
A lot. Yeah.
Can you tell me about something special that really still resonates with you, even if it was done years ago, that you did in your life, either through the Union of Jewish Women or any of the other organizations that you've headed and worked with?
You mean something that left a lasting impression with me? This is very strange, but when I was a little girl, very little girl, 7 or 8 or something, I had an aunt and uncle who owned an hotel. And every Christmas, my uncle used to open the hotel to members of organizations that had disabled people. And as family members, we used to go there on Christmas Day, and there would be this big meal for all the disabled people. And the first time I went, I was absolutely terrified when I saw people who didn't have hands, or couldn't walk properly, or were disfigured, etc. But as the years went by, and I think I did it three years in a row, by the time the third year came, I realized that they were exactly the same as I was. They were the same people as I was, and it left an absolute lasting memory in me. And my mother used to tell me that was the reason I took on charitable work, because I suddenly realized, there was no need to be afraid of people who were disfigured, but rather understand them and speak to them. And it became quite a thing in my life. I took on, when I was at school, at primary school, if there were children who were, who had something wrong with them, I always made an effort just to be, to say hello and to be nice, because I felt they needed recognition as a person. I mean, it's a really weird thing to remember from when you were 6 years old, but it stayed with me for many, many years.
Which shows you and exactly how much influence outside occurrences have on us, and what we are exposed to in our family.
Absolutely.
As you said that, it sparked a memory of in me, which I perhaps have mentioned before. But my mother lived in Vereeniging, and she worked for SANTA, which was the South African National Tuberculosis Association. And so she used to go into the Sharpeville township every day. I'll go back to that shortly.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program. If you'd like to contact us, please do so on WhatsApp 061 895 1019. If you would like to join in our conversation or have any questions for Bev Goldman, who's my guest today. Bev, we were talking about things that had influenced us as young children. Right. And my mother, as I said, worked for SANTA, which was a tuberculosis association in Vereeniging, and used to go into Sharpeville, which was a township just outside of Vereeniging, every day, to go and visit the families of tuberculosis people who were in the hospital. So they used to go and feed the families, take food in and what have you, and check them. And then when it was the Sharpeville riots, I still remember our school was closed. I think I was that was the last of primary school. And I remember going home, and asking Selina, who was my beloved Selina, our domestic worker, I asked her what was going on, and she said she doesn't know, but we must hide. Anyway, and my mother didn't come home, and she didn't come home, and when she did come home, she was in a terrible state. She had tried to get into the hospital because some of the people from Sharpeville that she'd been looking after had run, the nurses that were worked with her, ran out to say that some of their people had been shot. And I can still remember my mother that night crying because she had gone to the hospital to see who had been shot. And of course, there were a lot more than were being reported, and they were lying on the floors and everything. They were not getting treatment. She was in a terrible state. So was the medical officer of health who worked with her, Henry Bernstein. And she was never allowed back into Sharpeville again. It was closed to whites.
We have some really dreadful history, don't we, Sue? Some terrible history that we've had to live through.
But I think if it's changed us for the good,
yes, without a
then
doubt,
hopefully we can go on and work with it.
Yeah.
Now, Bev, there was something else that I wanted you to talk about. It was a concert.
Oh, yes. Okay, this is on this coming Sunday. The Union of Jewish Women is holding a fantastic concert called What the World Needs Now. It's going to be at 3:00 at Santon King David, and there are a whole lot of Jewish singers and entertainers, and it's really going to be quite outstanding. The two singers who appeared on Chai FM on Friday gave a little bit of an idea of what was going on, and there are a few tickets left, so we would be delighted if more people came, especially younger people, because most of the artists are young, and their repertoire is going to be really beautiful. So that's the Union of Jewish Women. And then I also want to give another plug, because I'm so passionate about the union, and that is, if anybody's listening, we really do need more young people coming to help us. I know that the young women have got, as you said earlier, they've got such a lot to do with their children, etc., etc. But the union, I think that the feeling of love that you get when you work for the union as a volunteer, when you can do that, the feeling of love you get from the beneficiaries is worth absolutely everything. And we have marvelous projects that they can work on. So, we would like them all to come. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, very briefly, we had a brilliantly successful morning called Women of Courage. We had 5 women who have gone through extreme traumas in their lives, and they spoke about them. We had a full audience. We would have had many more, but we didn't have a big enough venue. And that was the kind of thing. People were absolutely astounded at what they heard and at what the union does. So my little plug for the union, it's an outstanding organization.
And my plug for that is that it is open to everybody.
Absolutely.
So, while it's called the Union of Jewish Women, please just know that it is open for, we encourage other people to join us,
yes,
and celebrate with us, and especially as the wars go on around the world today, not certainly on the African continent, Middle East, Ukraine, Russia. We need to all work together for a better world, and perhaps to recognize within each other the humanity in each of us, that we are each struggling with what's going on at the moment. And, I just wanted to mention something coming out of Israel. It was in one of those sites, the beauty of the Jewish, of Jewish something other. And it says that in June, Andrei Koslov, he was rescued from Hamas captivity, and he is now making rounds visiting Israeli cancer patients in hospital.
I know.
Isn't that wonderful?
It is amazing, yeah.
Thank you so much, Bev, for being with me. I really appreciate it. Craig's telling us to wrap up.
He's very fierce, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And we've got a very short song. Actually, because this bothered me. But before we end, I just wanted to say, aspire to be a giver of inspiration, a giver of hope, a giver of light, and a giver of love. May you continue with your wonderful work,
Thank you
Bev.
so much,
And I
Sue,
really
and
enjoyed being on air with you today.
so have I, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk so much about the union. And thank you, Craig, very much.